come. Hey, real quick, to everyone in here joining us in the room and to everyone joining us online, I know we've got people from Chicago and from North Carolina and from Atlanta and to Miami to Indonesia. Welcome and Merry Christmas, y'all. Yeah, let's try that one again. Merry Christmas. Yeah. So today I want to present to you 3 simple truths of Christmas. And at the end of the day, these 3 simple truths are at the heart of what Christianity is. And these 3 simple truths are what make Christianity unique compared to all the other major worldviews and all the other major world religions out there. Now, the first truth is the most unbelievable one of them all, and that is this: God is human. God is human. Will you repeat that after me? God is human. All right, repeat that, okay? The kindergartners got it. Let's the rest of us try. Let's try it again. Repeat after me. God is human.
God is human.
That's right. At the very least, Christmas means that God stooped down and became one of us. God in a bod. That's what we believe. If you're a kid in there, raise your hand. Kid in here? Okay, I want you to repeat after me, kids. Say, God in a bod. You got a third of the story right already. You see, as Christians, we believe on Christmas that the spiritual became material. The cosmic microscopic, creator created, immeasurable to Emmanuel. From throne room to teenage womb, majesty to manger, streets of gold to bed of straw, from beyond to Bethlehem. From an audience of angels to surrounded by shepherds. The recipient of all praise became the recipient of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. From holy of holies to hunted by Herod, the refuge became a refugee. From infinite to infant, fearful, wonderful maker became fearfully and wonderfully made. Venerable to vulnerable, the hero of heaven became human. And my friends, if that's true, then that changes everything. And maybe I could say it to you like this today. It is said that Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, right? It's the most wonderful time. But is it? Okay, is it really? Because see, what I've found is that in the trenches of everyday life, Christmas can in fact be painful. Christmas can be difficult. Christmas can be the most exhausting time of the year for a variety of reasons. Like for one, your schedules get busier and you don't have any time to be busier, do you? You're already living at your margin or past your limits, or you have no margin in your life. And yet somehow during Christmas, you had 6 Christmas parties and year-end goals, and you travel, brave ice, weather, and snow to visit family, your in-laws, and you don't even like your in-laws, but you visit your in-laws, and before you know it, you're walking into the next year just absolutely exhausted from Christmas this year. Here's another thing that complicates Christmas. Can I get an amen? Almost no one gets healthier during the Christmas season. And I would suggest to you that if you do get healthier during Christmas, you're doing it wrong. And I'm the pastor. Okay, so I'll exercise over the Christmas break, but I will only do that in order to offset all the Christmas fudge and Christmas cookies and Christmas cake and Christmas donuts, and you even know Christmas donuts exist, but they do in my house. I mean, kids, Christmas isn't about the presents, it's about Jesus and the food, and you will come to understand that one day when you get older. Here's what else makes Christmas hard. You spend all your money on stuff you don't need for people you don't like. It's the funny thing about it is that you spend all your money to provide stuff for people who already have everything. I mean, hey, here's some more shoes for your shoe closet. Here's some more toys for your toy room. I mean, what do we do? Some of you are going to be paying off credit debt in Easter, right? And the April version of you would like to get a piece of the December version of you for spending all of her money. Here's another one. Family can complicate Christmas, can it? And I'm not really going to go there. We talked about that last week, but let me just say this about it. One thing. For some of you, your family problem is sitting next to you right now. Don't look. Don't look. Don't look. No, instead, you know what you need to do? Whoever you're here with, family or friends, I want you to put your arms around them. I just want you to repeat after me. Say, Merry Christmas. Yeah. Say, I love you. Yeah. But only because Jesus makes me. Some of y'all enjoy that a little too much. Now, on a serious note, Christmas can also be a time of regret and grief because you're reminded, I didn't get done what I wanted to get done in 2018. Or maybe you're reminded of a loved one who you don't have with you this Christmas. And that can be really, really hard. And don't you see, Christmas doesn't always feel like the most wonderful time of the year. But here at the Love the Ville Church, we still believe that Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year. But not because of what's happening in our lives, but because of what happened. Not because of the physical circumstances of our day-to-day, but because of the physical circumstances of Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, when Jesus came and didn't claim to give us a message about God, but rather a vision of God. We believe that in Jesus, God became human. And that's amazing. We believe, Matthew chapter 1, where it is written, look, the virgin will conceive a child, she'll give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. We believe Isaiah chapter 9, where it says, for a child is born to us, a son given to us, the government will rest on his shoulders, and he'll be called Mighty God. We believe John chapter 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Word, Jesus, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were created through him and by him, but then the Word became flesh, and he lived among us. God is human. So one more time, will you repeat that after me? Say, God is human. Now, here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that not all of y'all are playing this game and repeating after me. In fact, I noticed that some of y'all probably aren't buying much of what I'm saying up here right now. Okay, you're a skeptic, you're a doubter. The only reason you came is because mom asked you, right? Dad asked you, and you're just honoring mom and dad's Christmas tradition. Maybe the only reason you came is because a pretty girl asked you. Smart stuff right there, man. We're in your way. Some of you just got caught in the traffic, and you're like, all right, well, we're here now. Might as well. So look, if that's you, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I want you to know that this is a church for people who have hard questions. Because I'm a pastor who has hard questions. And I want to point out to you something today that you may have never considered and you've definitely never heard in a Christmas sermon before. Did you know that it is actually possible for Christians to reconstruct much of what we believe about Jesus without using the historical sources we have in the Bible? Did you know that? And that's good news for you because you don't trust the Bible. Right? Did you know we can get much of what Christians say about Jesus from sources that are outside the Bible and make a pretty clear picture of him? Okay, let me say it like this. Raise your hand if you believe in Abraham Lincoln. If you believe in him, okay? You believe you believe in Abraham Lincoln? Did he exist? Okay, good. It's pretty much all of us. Now, raise your hand if you've ever met Abraham Lincoln. Who's met him? Okay, a few 7-year-olds over here on the side, but besides them, the rest of us have never met him. So how do you know he exists? How do you know? Well, I'll tell you how you know. You take historical sources, you weigh their reliability, and then you begin to construct for yourself a picture of what you believe this 19th century president was like. We can do the same with Jesus. And we don't even need the sources from our sacred texts. Now, I want to show you right now just a few examples of what people, not with a pro-Jesus, but with a no-Jesus agenda, wrote about him during his time and day. And you've never heard this in a Christmas sermon before, I promise you that. But for some of you, this is the only time I can get you is on Christmas, and I want to show you these powerful, powerful excerpts. Let's check this out. Did you know that Jesus was known to be wise and virtuous? Josephus, first century non-Christian historian, said at that time there was a wise man named Jesus. His conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. Did you know that he was also known to perform miracles? Celsus, second century philosopher who was anti-Christian, trying to tear it apart, wrote this. He said, Jesus returned home highly elated at possessing miraculous powers, and on the strength of them gave himself out to be a god. Did you know that it was written outside of the scriptures that Jesus was crucified, and on that crucifixion day, it got really, really weird? Thallus, first century non-Christian historian, wrote that on the whole world, there pressed a most fearful darkness, and the rocks were rent by an earthquake, and many places in Judea and other districts were thrown down. Now, Tacitus, another first century non-Christian historian, adds on to that when he writes, Christus, from whom the name Christian had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty, that's crucifixion back then, during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate. And that day a most mischievous superstition broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome. Now, I want you to notice what Tacitus says here. 1, Jesus was crucified. 2, the movement that broke out from it he thought was evil. And 3, he said it was unstoppable. It exploded in Judea and it reached Rome. It was said that his disciples believed he rose from the dead. Josephus, first century non-Christian historian, said that they reported, Jesus' disciples, that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. It was also written that the reason, his disciples were so certain that he had died and rose from the dead that they were willing to die for their beliefs as well. Tacitus writes that Nero inflicted the most exquisite tortures on them. And it was also written that the reason why they were so passionate about this Jesus is because his resurrection proved to them that he was a God. Pliny the Younger, Roman ruler and a lawyer of the time, wrote that Christians were in the habit of meeting on a certain fixed day, that'd be Sunday, before it was light, when they sang in alternate verses a hymn to Christ as to a God. Now, check this out. You know what is so fascinating to me about the excerpts I just read you? And I could read you more, but you know what's fascinating about those? They are not written by Jesus' friends. They are written by Jesus' enemies. They are not written by people with a pro-Jesus agenda. They are written by people with a no-Jesus agenda. Look, if you want to get a clear picture of what a historical person was like, don't just read what his friends write, read what his enemies write as well. And at the overlap of the two, it can begin to become clear. And here's what we know, what both Jesus' friends and enemies have to say about him. They said, next slide, that he was wise and virtuous, known to perform miracles, got crucified, and it got really weird that day, but they believed he rose from the dead. They were willing to die for him because of that, and because of all that, they believed that Jesus was a God. And let me ask you, what kind of human would you have to be anyways for your birthday to be celebrated 2,000 years later as an international holiday by billions? I mean, just look at us on the other side of the world. I'll tell you what kind of human. You'd have to be the kind of human that the world has only seen once. You'd have to be the kind of man that's perhaps more than just another man. And that's what we Christians believe about Jesus. He's more than just a man. Jesus, in him we see God. Now that's the first simple truth of Christmas, and it's unbelievable. Here's the second one, and it's irresistible. God is love. Will you repeat that after me? Say, God is love. Yeah, so as Christians, we believe God is essentially and substantially love. Love is who he is. Love is what he does. And for me, if that's true, that makes sense of my life. If the creative intelligence behind the universe and behind us is a God who only does, who only creates love, that makes sense of how I and you are wired. But let me ask you, what does it take to live a full and satisfied life? It takes love, right? It takes an outlet to give love. It takes an outlet to receive love. What does it take to live a life that's full of happiness and joy? Well, again, it's love. The quality of your life will always be directly related to the quality of your relationships. And you know what the key to relationships are? It's love. Love brings the best out of you, and it brings the best out of others. Don't you see? Love's the foundation of a life well lived. Love's the key, and you would expect that if a God of love was behind it all. You with me? So let me explain it like this. Again, for those of you who are skeptics and doubters in the room, basically to oversimplify the matter, you either got to believe that there is a God or there is no God, right? Now, if you believe there is a God, then that means you believe God's the driving force behind the universe. For Christians, love is the driving force behind the universe because God is love. But if you believe there's no God, then basically you just believe that science or math is all we have to explain the universe around us. Now, I'm not anti-science or math. I'm just saying that's all you got. Now, what I've found is that depending on which side of the spectrum you fall on, you tend to ask different questions of life. Like, for example, those who have a religious foundation tend to ask questions like who and why first before they move into this other set of questions. Now, those without God tend to start here. Questions determined by the scientific method, like how, what, when, where. I'll give you an example. The origins of the universe. If you are somebody from a without God worldview, you can answer the what and the when and the where and the how question of that really, really well based on science. You can take the very best evidence that science has to give and you can explain it for us, right? The most prevalent theory today about the origin of the universe is what we would call at a popular level the Big Bang Theory. Basically, there's this little supercharged ball of energy or light that exploded. into what we see today. Over billions of years, it has evolved here. Now, okay, how, what, when, where, that's great. Here's the only problem, though, with that scientific explanation. It can't tell us who, and it can't tell us why. Like, who banged the bang? Who created the little supercharged ball of matter or energy? Who hit the first domino to start it all? One of the essential premises of science is that every effect has a cause. Who was the first cause? Now, it's interesting. When I get to this point with some of my non-Christian friends, they always push back and they're like, okay, Tyler, well, you think it was God, right? What a fantasy. And maybe it is a fantasy. But you know what seems like more of a fantasy than the idea that God created everything? The idea that nothing created everything. Because that's what you got if you got no God. You got nothing. In the beginning, there was nothing. And nothing decided to do something? Please tell me about this nothing. Because if it decided to do something, it's not nothing, it's something. And tell me about the backstory of this nothing. What was it doing before it did something? Nothing? Like, if it makes your brain hurt to figure out where God comes from, it'll make your brain hurt even worse to figure out how one day nothing decided to motivate itself to create everything. You see, that, my friends, is really, really hard for me to believe. I don't know if I have enough faith for that. Now, here's what's really interesting to me. You see all the kids kind of moving around and cooing and cawing here. Okay, you know what's so cool about kids? Even from the youngest age, they're just naturally inclined, first, to ask these questions. Not these, but these, the who questions, the why questions. You ever notice that about a kid? Anybody got a 2 or a 3-year-old in your house right now? Yeah, so I've got a 3-year-old in my house, and here's what I know for a fact. A 3-year-old will never drive you crazy asking you, how? Daddy, how can I be a contributing member of this family? Nope. Daddy, what should I eat in order to grow up to be a strong boy? Nope. Mommy, when and where should I go to the potty? Never. You won't hear that from a 2 or 3-year-old. But let me tell you what you will hear over and over and over. Why? 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 Until finally you're just like, because I said so, all right, shut it. Now, that's not how I parent. Most of the time. But isn't it interesting how it just comes naturally to them? And as we get older, our questions don't change, they just get more sophisticated. Like, who am I? Why am I here? So at the end of the day, you just kind of got to choose. And again, if you push God out of the equation, then all you have left to explain everything is science and math. And I love science. I love math. I have one foot firmly planted in my faith, one foot firmly planted in. I believe it can be both and, not either or, right? But for those of you who all you have is math, let me just tell you, you will not spend the rest of your life looking for math. You'll spend the rest of your life looking for love, searching for love, yearning for love. And that makes a whole lot of sense if the creative force behind it all is a God who is love. And that's what the Christmas story teaches us. From the very beginning, God so loved the world that he gave his son. He loved, so he gave. Jesus is for all people. That's what we see in the Christmas story. I mean, have you ever noticed who Jesus invites to the manger? Who God directs there? It's amazing. So let me tell you. First, he invites the poor. How do I know that? Because Mary and Joseph were poor. How do I know that? Because they laid him in a manger. Don't romanticize the manger, y'all. It was a feeding trough for cows. I guarantee you, Mary had to brush the manure and the straw off before she laid her newborn baby there. Later, as Jesus grows older, he says things like, blessed are the poor. I think it's because he knew what it was like to be poor. And he knew the radical brand of dependence that the poor had that the rich would never understand. At the end of his life, Jesus says, when you love the poor, you love me. When you love the least of these, you love me. He sets up this one-to-one correlation between him and the poor. Because from the beginning and to the end of his life, he leveraged his divine privilege in order to dignify and lift up the underprivileged. And he calls us to do the same. Know who else was invited to the manger? The outsider, the racial, ethnic, and religious outsider. We call them kings or wise men, but I think it's a bad translation of the word. The Greek word underneath it is magi or magos. And you know what a magi was 2,000 years ago? They were a practitioner of the dark arts. They were a wizard. They were wizards, witches. So when you're thinking about the manger scene, don't think about like Buddy the Elf and Santa Claus showing up, because that's not what it was. It was more like Voldemort and the White Witch of Narnia. Which some of y'all got that manger scene, all right? Bless you. But here's the question. Why? Why would God send a prophecy out east and put a star in the sky to bring these super pagans to the cradle of baby Jesus? Why? Because from the beginning, God was making a statement that Jesus was for all the nations. You know who else was invited to the manger? It's obvious, a child. God became a child, weak, humble, vulnerable. You know who else was invited to the manger? The social outcasts. We call them shepherds. A shepherd back then was a dirty job. It was disreputable, dishonorable, and God puts an angelic envoy in the sky to sing them to the cradle of Jesus. Why? Because Jesus was establishing a new ethic. Dirty was the new clean, and clean was the new dirty. Dirty hands, pure heart, that's how he lived. You know who else was invited to the manger? The sinner. Sinner. See, if you read the first several verses of Matthew, it's interesting. There's this like family tree of Jesus. It's called a genealogy. So-and-so was the father of so-and-so, was the father of so-and-so, was the father. Like if you read it, I'm telling you, it's boring. But if you check out and study all the names in that genealogy, what you'll find is that in Jesus' family tree were some of the most egregious sinners to ever live. And for some folks, that is confusing. But for me, it's comforting. Because if there's a branch on Jesus' family tree for sinners like them, I know there's a branch on his family tree for sinners like me. Don't you see? Don't you see? See, ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the cast of the greatest story ever told, the cast of the grand unveiling of God to the world. Jesus is for all people. See, this is why at Northeast Christian Church we liken ourselves as the Love-the-Ville Church. We will love you. We believe that church has a PR problem today in America. Okay, when people hear the word church, especially those outside the church, they think of something. And it's usually not good, and it's definitely not the cross-shaped, incarnational, self-sacrificial, unconditional love of Jesus. So we're out to change that. One small act of great love at a time. That's how I know we will love you. We're not perfect, but we will do our very best to love you, no matter who you are, no matter if you're that sinner or that outcast or that weak and vulnerable person, no matter if you're the outsider, religious, racial, ethnic, doesn't matter. We will love you. You may hate us, but we will not hate you. You may be against us, but we will not be against you. You may be a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu or an atheist or an agnostic or a Jew. Doesn't matter. Again, we will love you. You may die an atheist. And I can promise you this, we will show up at your hospital room and we'll comfort your family and we'll go to the funeral and we will mourn your loss because you will have been someone that we loved. Because you see, we believe there's one true metric, one true measurement of godliness out there, and that is the love of Jesus. John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his son. And so we go and love as well. Which brings me to my third simple truth of Christmas. God is human, that's unbelievable. God is love, it's irresistible. But God is for you. And ladies and gentlemen, that's personal. You see, if Christmas is true, then that means that the God who created the universe and all of its artistic ingenuity and scientific brilliance packed all that glory down into the smallest human life form. If Christmas is true, then the God who holds the world in the palm of his hands became such a small child that he was held in the palms of his mother's hands. If Christmas is true, that means that the God who breathed the stars and all 200 trillion galaxies out there did not consider the expanse of the universe too far of a distance to travel for you. No, he stooped down and became one of us. And then he stooped down even lower and became our sin. Don't you see? There is no distance Jesus wouldn't travel for you because he's for you. And his story, the greatest story ever told, is for you today. So here's my advice for you. As we step towards 2019, I want to challenge you to get on the right side of history, and that's Jesus' side. Accept the message, join the movement, and change the world.